Hey everybody, it's Nick, and welcome back. Thanks for being here, but this week, not necessarily a super upper chipper one. This was a rough session, and just a word of encouragement to all of you other DMs out there. Sometimes crap sessions happen. Sometimes there is a really rough one. You just have to grit your teeth and get through it and hope that the next one is better. And so I'm going to share with you my really rough session from this past week, and hopefully you guys can learn some lessons from it and gain some knowledge and hopefully not repeat my terrible mistakes. Though I'm interested in hearing what you guys think in the comments. I don't know if I made that many mistakes in this, like I would have changed it and done different things. Just how the dice happened and player choice and how everything lined up just kind of sucked. So let's jump right into it and catch you guys up on where we are. When last we left our heroes, they had been adventuring in the city of Volta, and there's been a bunch of shenanigans and adventures that have happened there, and I'm not going to be able to catch you guys up on everything that went down, so go watch the last two episodes if you want to get caught up on what happened in the city of Volta on the northern coast of these southern isles. And as we started this session, the ship that they are sailing on made their way out of Volta towards New Andrast, a colony of the country Renora. And just a bit of background, Renora and Krell, the country that their ship is coming from, are sort of hereditary enemies, very like Great Britain and France circa 1700s maybe. So not actively at war on all fronts right now, but definitely hostilities and enemies. There was a war that they just ended a couple of decades ago, I think, if I'm remembering my own timeline correctly. So they're sort of hereditary enemies, but this is the only sort of civilized colony in the islands, and so this was their place to start. They got to start somewhere, right? So maybe they can show up at this place and ask them, hey, do you have any help? So sort of like best case scenario, they get some parting advice, and worst case scenario, they get attacked on sight. So we'll see what happens when they get to New Andrast, but that's next session, not this one. So they're at sea, they're sailing, trying to make their way to New Andrast. This is probably about a 7 to 10 day journey there, and there's a lot of dead time and described days rolling on without interest, and 4 or 5 days, nothing is happening. They're just open sea until about a week in, they get to what they can spot, maybe 50 to 100 feet below the surface are shipwrecks, dozens and dozens of shipwrecks. And someone who is fairly knowledgeable on the crew remarks that this must be the site of the Battle of Rincho Channel, where two great navies centuries ago met and pretty much sank each other, and there's just a ship graveyard here, and there's a very somber, heavy atmosphere. You know, shipwreck is one of the worst things that can happen while you're at sea, and so all the sailors sort of pay their respects and everything, and while they're just quietly, slowly sailing through that channel, some humanoids climbed up out of the water onto their ship, which was the beginning of initiative and super freaky for the players. So instead of putting a bunch of minis out there for all of the monsters that were attacking and 20 more minis for the rest of the crew, I just put 4 enemies on the table and said, these are the ones that you're responsible for. However quickly you can deal with them determines how quickly you can go and save the rest of the crew from what they're fighting. So maybe could save some lives of the crew in the process. However, the battle didn't go so well. They were up against 3 Sea Spawn and a Deep Scion. Sea Spawn is sort of like the crew from Davy Jones, Pirates of the Caribbean. They got like coral growing all over them, and they're like dead humanoids. And Deep Scions are super cool. I wonder if I can put a picture up. If I can't, go and like Google it, look somewhere, because Deep Scions look really awesome. But so they're fighting these things, and it was kind of going okay, but this was the combat that sort of tanked. So I want to walk you through it and let you know how the night went as a result of this combat. So the major issue occurred probably 2/3 of the way through the fight when Tico the monk went unconscious. Everyone had been fighting, those people were getting stunned, some by the Deep Scion, there was some back and forth, but they were killing most of the Sea Spawn, they were pretty close. I think there was 1 Sea Spawn left and he was pretty hurt, and the Deep Scion was about half HP. But Tico is the only melee character, and he goes unconscious. So the Deep Scion is starting to look for a way out. he sees there's a lot of crew around and everyone's still fighting and he's at half, and he wants to survive another day. The bad guys want to win. They're intelligent creatures. They're not just going to fight until everyone is dead, even if they know they're losing. He could just jump over the ship, and he wants to get out. So I figure there's an interesting chance for some cool drama here. He grabs the unconscious body of Tico the elf on his turn and drags him towards the edge of the ship and says, "Let me go peacefully, or I will take him with me." Basically saying, if you don't attack me, I'll leave him here, I'll jump over, we'll go our separate ways, you win, good job, I'm out. But if you aggress, I'm taking your friend down with me, and maybe I die because you're aggressing, but he will die too. And I figured this was super cool. Like, this was very dramatic, very interesting. The player will get to have a real tense life or death moment, but basically his friends are going to jump in and be able to say, okay, we're just going to not attack you for a round, and your friend is going to be fine. And so I thought that was what's going to happen. They were going to be able to save their friend. It would be a cool, like, sort of negotiating sequence. Very much, as Matt Colville has mentioned, the bad guys taking their friends and trying to ransom them back to the heroes for their own lives. Very interesting negotiation exchange. I was super excited for the potential. They still had another sea spawn they could kill. No big deal. Well, it would have been no big deal if the players had said, sure, we're not going to attack you. But for some reason that I still cannot understand, one of the players decided that they needed to capture and interrogate one of these creatures. I don't know why. I don't know where he got that idea. I think afterwards the player was sort of explaining about how, well, maybe if we see these things later, we can interrogate one now and then we'll know what they're about and maybe how to defeat them better or how to avoid them or negotiate them with them more. And I was like, I kind of get it, but it was tough because the player who was trying to intimidate them was doing cool things. He was flying with his boots of flying and casting prestidigitation. Man, that's hard to say. And doing cool illusions and stuff like that. But earlier in the fight, he had been knocked unconscious. And so I sort of figured your chance to intimidate them with the line of, I'm a god and you should fear me, which was the angle that he was going, was sort of hard when you've already been knocked unconscious. Like, if you can knock a god out, is it really worth worshiping? So it was sort of a loss from the beginning. I figured it didn't make sense for that intimidation to work. These were semi-intelligent creatures at minimum, and they had already sort of knocked him out and moved on, regarded him as not a threat. It's hard for you to come back and say, hey, I'm a god now. So maybe that was a misinterpretation on my part. Maybe there was reason there for him to still be able to intimidate. I'm not sure, but I didn't think it made sense in the moment, and that's what I went with. And a lot of times you just have to do that as a DM and say, what makes sense? I'm just going to go with it. So this player is like levitating in the air near this deep scion and saying, let him go, and menacing and aggressing and placing a mark on him to say you're marked for death if you don't do what I'm telling you to. And I mean, he's intimidating. He's menacing presence. He's threatening him verbally, not physically, but verbally. And I took this as enough of a threat on the deep scion's part to, on his next turn, grab the guy and go overboard. And at this point, I'm in full panic mode. Like, this feels awful. I'm doing the things that I think the bad guys would do, and it makes sense, but this player is probably about to die, and it's totally out of their hands. I'm fine with players dying if the dice go really hard against them, and that's just how it's going that evening, or if they make really dumb decisions and stuff happens. But to die when it's not really your fault, when you did what you should be doing, and because of the decisions of other players, it sucks. Like, it's hard. It's not fun. And so I was in full panic mode. I was miserable for this player. You could tell on this player's face they were miserable. It was a rough situation. And in one of the comments of one of my recent videos, someone mentioned that they think I'm a pretty lethal DM, and I sort of disagreed with this. I don't think I am a very lethal DM. I ran a whole campaign from 3rd to 12th level where only one player died and they were resurrected, and that was in the final boss fight against Orcus. So I felt like I was running a pretty low death game. This one would be a little bit higher. They're starting at 1st level, and so maybe there's more chance for it. I just think 5th edition is very swingy at low levels, which they still are. They're only 4th level at this point. So I feel like 5th edition is still very swingy there, and I'm bumping it up a little bit, but not significantly. But we're facing potentially the 2nd player death in 5 sessions. and there was already another potential player death last session, and so I'm just feeling like, man, this is miserable. Like, I don't want them to feel like they're always going to die. I also don't want to do things that the bad guys wouldn't do. This is realistic. This is plausible. The bad guy is trying to escape and survive, and so it was a tough situation all around. Again, going back, if I could redo the whole session, I'm not sure I'd change anything. I think everyone made reasonable, plausible decisions. If I wanted everyone to be happy at the end of the session, I probably would just have the Deep Scion on his turn just run and jump overboard. I'd be done with it, end the fight. But I wanted to add a little more drama and tension, which I did, but it wasn't fun this time. So at this point, I'm in full panic mode, but I can't let up. I can't just fabricate a situation where they get to escape for free with no consequence, as they've been building up to this moment. I have to let them learn to live and die with their choices. And I felt bad for this player because he was going to have to pay the price for somebody else's decisions, but I can't change the situation. It is what it is, and I don't want to just DM fiat them to live, because then they know that I'm pulling the strings, and that's not fair to them because it's not real. It's not what would have happened. So I stuck with it. And on his next turn, the Deep Scion grabs Tico and jumps overboard because he's being threatened, being menaced. And at this point, it's not over, but I'm starting to think through, all right, well, how are we going to get Jared, a new player character, into this game? Because Tico's gone for, in my mind. There's a couple of options, maybe, but for the most part, it's tough. They're still on the surface of the water. Clement is the one who's been doing the threatening and menacing. He has these boots of flying, so he flies down to the surface of the water, and he's going to grab onto Tico's body and try to wrest control of his friend from the Deep Scion. This is going to be very interesting because basically it's going to be a contested athletics check, and the Deep Scion has +4, and Clement only has +1. So it's going to be a tough roll-off. At this point, Orar, who has been sort of up and above the battle for the most part, is able to see all of this, says, hey, I want to attack the Deep Scion with my Firebolt, which is sort of retooled for lightning damage because it's a storm sorcerer. So I let players reflavor spell damage. You get to pick it once at the beginning when you pick the spell, and that's it. So he's got a lot of lightning spells that aren't actually lightning spells in the book. So it's Lightning Bolt, but it's the cantrip Firebolt as lightning damage. Anyway, not important. So he's going to cast Firebolt at the Deep Scion, and he's asking if maybe it would give him disadvantage on the check to hang on, and obviously there's nothing in the rules for this, right? There's no rule that says that you can do that taking damage imposes disadvantage on contested grapple checks. But it was interesting. I thought it was neat, and there's going to be a roll-off anyway, and they're happening sort of at the same time. It said, sure. Err on the side of the players. When in doubt, err on the side of the players. It's already a tense situation. I want to give them every advantage I can. Yes, that makes sense and is reasonable. But I tell him it's not going to be for free. I like when players are creative like this and want to come up with stuff. I don't usually just say yes. I also almost never just say no. I try to say yes but or yes and, like, yes, this is going to work, but you need to roll for it, or yes, this is going to work and something else kind of negative is going to happen. So what I told him is, because the Deep Scion had dragged Tico into the water, he's getting 3/4 cover from Tico's body. So normally the Deep Scion's AC is 11. But it is +5 from the 3/4 cover, so now it's at 16. And I told him, if you hit an AC of 11 to 15, you are hitting the 3/4 cover. You're going to hit Tico, and he's unconscious, and it'll be a failed death saving throw. If you hit an AC of 1 to 10, you're not going to hit anybody, you're just going to miss wide, completely no big deal. But if you hit an AC of 16 or higher, you hit the Deep Scion, and he will have disadvantage. And so the player sort of weighed his options, one failed death save versus advantage, disadvantage kind of contest on this roll. He figured it was worth it. I think at this point Tico didn't have any failed death saves, so it was worth rolling the die on that one. So he rolls, and he gets a 17. So he hits the Deep Scion, and he takes some damage. The Scion takes some damage, and that was rough for him. He's getting pretty low at this point. So there's a roll-off now, and the Deep Scion has a +4 to his athletics, and he has disadvantage, whereas Clement has only a +1 to athletics, and he has advantage because he uses Tides of Chaos as a wild magic sorcerer. Which is super cool. I love making him roll on that chart. We have sort of tweaked rules, so he rolls on it more often, and fun things happen, and it's super awesome. I love wild magic sorcerers if you can get their surge table to happen. But either way, So it's advantage versus disadvantage, but higher modifier versus lower modifier. And Clement rolls, and he gets like a 16 or 18, something like that, after his modifier. It's pretty good. He rolls pretty well. And it would have totally worked if the Deep Scion hadn't, at disadvantage, rolled a 20 and a 17. And a 17 plus 4 is still higher than whatever Clement got. So Clement does not succeed, but at this point, people are jumping in the water, there's damage happening, the Deep Scion is pretty low, he's in the water, he's in his safe environment, so what he does is he just uses his swim speed, lets go of Tico, and jets off through the water. And so they can get him back up on shore and on the deck of the ship, and he's got a couple of failed death saves at this point, but they're able to stabilize him, and the situation is sort of resolved without any catastrophic failure. Now, as I'm describing the whole situation, it feels like it was very dramatic and tense, and it was. But I'm telling you, at the table, it was miserable. Like, it wasn't fun for me. I could tell it wasn't fun for Jared playing Tico. And honestly, I had a conversation afterwards with Jared, and he was so cool about it. He never blamed me. He knew that the situation was happening as it was. He knew I wasn't out to get anyone. I'm not trying to kill any of my players, that this is what would happen. This was reasonable. This was rational. It was totally fine. There was nothing I should have done different, nothing he could have done different. It just felt bad to have his life not in his hands and another player sort of being able to dictate whether or not he lived or died, and all you had to do was just say, okay, we're not going to attack this individual, and they still didn't do that. And so he was sort of bummed. He wasn't really upset at the other player either. It was just kind of a sucky situation, and everyone was a little bit miserable. So that was a rough situation. The only saving grace, thankfully, was after Tico went down and he was grabbed as a hostage, Travis, the gunslinger, grabs a nearby ally crew member and puts a gun to their head and says, we'll do a hostage exchange, I'll give you this one for that one. And sort of is whispering, like, don't worry, just a ruse, like, I'm not going to actually give you over. This crew member's kind of panicking a little bit, and Hunter, playing Travis, sort of declares, I'm a tactical genius, as he thinks of this whole situation. Well, on the remaining sea spawn's last turn, before he got totally murdered, he rushes towards Travis and mauls whatever is in front of him, because these guys are a little more like undead, less intelligent creatures, and mauls to death an NPC who's being held and restrained by Travis. And Travis sits there and he's holding this lifeless corpse of his ally and realizes, oh shoot, I just definitely got this person killed. And just a couple minutes after he exclaimed with delight, he says the same phrase, but the delivery was phenomenal. He's just like, I'm a tactical genius. And it was just great. It was just such a funny moment in the situation that sort of broke up the tension a little bit. That helped out significantly, because he sort of realized he definitely got this person killed, and he felt really bad about it for the rest of the evening, which was awesome, which means he is recognizing this isn't just like nameless NPC. It's a person. It's a person who had a family, and he got them killed. And this was Evelyn Wu. She was the helmswoman, and she was brash and aggressive and liked to spar with members of the crew on deck, and they knew who she was, and so it sort of gave some weight to the fact that he had gotten this person killed. So I appreciated that he was upset about getting somebody killed, but it added a bit of levity, his lines in the middle of this whole fight. So as rough as that was, they survived. No one died. Some NPCs died, but no major PCs died. There was nothing that really had long-term effects. No magic items were lost. They won, but it was still a rough time. So I'm eager to get on to the next situation, the next encounter, keep moving the story forward, and maybe try to salvage something. Because the thing I've got coming next, I'm very excited about, and I think it'll be very interesting. And so later on, a couple days later, they see a ship that is flying no colors at all, which they know to be very, very odd. And the captain has everybody have arms and get up on deck of the ship and is ready for anything, not attacking, but ready for anything. And then they later see that the ship, as it is approaching, has a white flag of truce. And they want to talk, and so it's okay, let's see what they're about and getting closer. But as the strangers get closer, they identify themselves as pirates, and clearly they're using the white flag of truce as a guise, as a ruse to get close to their prey, so their prey won't run off as soon as they see pirates. And so the pirate captain makes his grand speech about how surrender or die, and we'll do whatever we want to your ship, and you can leave with most of your lives, but it's better than all this bloodshed happening. The player Jared, playing Tico the monk, notices on this captain there are gray-scaled tattoos all along his forearms and wrists, and he's got like snake heads on the backs of his fists, and he recognized, based on these tattoos, that this individual is something called a Master of Vipers. He's a type of monk who has gained combat mastery over a type of form of combat, as well as extranatural, supernatural abilities to go along with them. And sort of gave some background and some lore to this character who was a monk and grew up and would have known what these individuals were about. And there are many, many masters of different types of things, and so this is not like the one. But that's right. If you're recognizing this, I straight up lifted it from Matt Colville's game. Basically, I told him, if you win in single combat against this guy, then you will become the Master of Vipers and you'll take over his powers. However, I didn't use Colville's masters. He used, I think, locusts and ravens, and sort of wanted to evoke that sort of demonic, edgy style. I instead went a different route. I looked up what are the traditional animal styles in Kung Fu in the real world, and I thought that would be a cool analog to monks, because often monks have sort of Eastern lore and hand-to-hand fighting and all that kind of stuff. So this is the Master of Vipers. So there's all kinds of things like serpents, crane, tiger, leopard, dragon, and all kinds of things like that, which give me a lot of options for stuff I can do with them. So this is a Master of Vipers, obviously in that serpent form of fighting style. And I have told the player all of what's going down, and he realizes, hey, I'm going to challenge this guy to single combat for the ships. Whoever wins gets the ships. And the player, Jared, is super excited at this thing that's going to happen. It's been a really miserable session for him so far, and he's excited to, like, maybe get to challenge this guy. He's a little nervous. He's like, can I take him? And obviously I sort of reassure him, like, I wouldn't put this in front of you if it was impossible for you to win, right? I think that's kind of a jerk move to be like, yes, you could totally fight this guy, hand-to-hand combat, one-on-one, and if you beat him, you can become, I mean, he's 15th level, so good luck. But no, so basically what I did is I just made a 4th level monk, rolling up a legitimate character the same way the players did, and I gave him the Master of Vipers ability, which I guess I can link to down below if you guys want to see what it is. And so it was a really cool combat. He was very excited to try to save the day and get to do something neat. The captain sort of cockily and aggressively says, sure, whatever, you're a master of nothing, come at me, little elf boy. And so they're challenging each other for the ships. Whoever wins gets to do whatever they want with the other person's ship and crew. And Captain Vikram of Tico's ship comes over and is like, hey, yeah, great idea, but definitely not doing that. Like, I'm fine with this ruse, but we're not going to just surrender if you lose. If it looks like you're going to fall, or if you throw in the towel, or it looks like it's going poorly, or if you just lose, we're going to attack outright, because I'm not just going to give up the ship based on what you do. But we'll go along with it for now, because maybe you'll win. I don't know. So I told the player that going forward. He was like, cool, I got this, it'll be fine. And they get into combat. It starts to go pretty well. He's a better monk than I am, because he's been playing it for several sessions, and I just made a monk this week. So I don't know everything about playing a monk, but he seems to be doing stuff pretty well at first, and then a couple rounds into combat, he stops being able to roll higher than, I think, a 6, and it just makes it hard, and very quickly in a couple of rounds, because PvP is like super swingy and very weird in 5th edition. I don't recommend it on the whole, but because of the situation, he goes down basically right away after a couple of rounds, and as soon as he hits the deck, Travis pulls out his pistol and opens fire. And that's where we ended last week's session. So we're going to pick up there next week with that fight. Hopefully it goes pretty well. It'll be very interesting seeing how it'll go with Tico starting out unconscious, 0 HP. However, the other ship captain has already been damaged some as well. So we'll see what happens. Hopefully we can get some healing on Tico, and that'll help things out quite a bit. But we'll see what happens next week. A lot of really cool, interesting things. This week was rough. This week was tough, and just want to encourage you guys, sometimes it happens. Keep playing. Next session is always better. If this one sucked, next session will get better. Hopefully you guys learned some lessons from mine. Again, I don't know if I'd change anything, but the situation was what it was. Maybe you learned something, maybe you had something to take away from it. Again, I just encourage you, the next time you hit a session that is just awful, just miserable, and you want to get out of it, do that. Try to finish on an up note if you can, but this one finished on a really down note, so I don't know. But try to get through it and get to next week. Start planning for next week. Don't take it easy on them next week. Don't swing the other direction and be like, oh, it's just here's a bunch of magic items. Sorry about last week. But have something fun and be ready. And I think next week will be really fun and interesting, really epic. We have sort of the end of this opening arc and adventure as they're going to arrive in New Andrast and see what happens there. I'm very excited to see what happens going forward. I'm looking forward to next week a lot. I think it'll be really good. I think it'll be really fun. I'm looking forward to it. It'll be really long probably as a session, so maybe next week's video will be really long. But hopefully you guys had some lessons in there that you learned from my mistakes or my successes or things that worked or things that didn't. If you want to steal the Master of whatever, feel free to. No big deal. But we're going to bounce back next week, and I think it'll be cool and fun and epic, and I'm looking forward to it. I'll see you next time, friends.